awkward title, I am sure, but I was trying to get two different time frames into the same title. So I want to talk about this wonderful place, the Crowsnest Pass of southwestern Alberta. I want to talk about this place and the archaeology of this place and how it was all initiated by this fellow who is the subject of our session today. And it may seem odd to shoot somebody from the back, but he was giving a talk on this very hot, smoky day in the Crowsnest Pass to a group of the general public. It was Heritage Day in the Crowsnest Pass. He was always so good at giving talks and lectures and public hikes and things. And he just turned around to look, and I thought, well, that's appropriate. He's looking out at a landscape that he knows very well. So in 1972, he launched a major program that went on, and it's kind of difficult to give it a full end because it kept going through CRM after that, but about a 5 to 8 year program of archaeology in the Crowsnest Pass. And I used the 6 decades because before that, there had been occasional visits by people like Dick Forbis and Barney and his crew members, as Bill had said, when it was raining and head smashed in, you went surveying. And because I was having trouble figuring out why are they here at this point recording sites. So there was a bit of archaeology work done before this big program, but 1972 is the start of it. And he had people from all over. He had students from various universities where there were archaeology departments, or programs at least. And he had volunteers from even the local community. He had his grad students, John Driver, his first PhD student, and then the rest of us MAs who came on over the 70s. So there were, 6 of us, I think, that I can count: Allison, myself, Rod Pickard, B. Loveseth, Brian Ronigan, Phil Duke. And with those very varied crews, he sent them out surveying, and you can see down the main valley, and then, I'm sorry I can't use a pointer, but up the Livingstons, up Gold Creek Valley. And they were recording sites by observation of surface exposures and not shovel testing in those years at all. So they found some 300 sites, not bad. That's about 60% of the known total today. They excavated some, and I'll talk very briefly about that, but it was a pretty fundamental project. This is the sites that are recorded, so you've got about 500 sites in the 3 Borden blocks, DGPN to DjPo. And more work has been done in the eastern end of the pass, the right-hand side there, and up Gold Creek than any other area of the pass in the last 30 years, I guess I would say. And there's been more pipelines, more power lines, country residential, and quite a lot of work done up Gold Creek. Now, I spent the winter looking over all the reports because I had been away from Crowsnest archaeology for quite some time. And something struck me in the change from when it was University of Calgary / Lifeways doing work up till about the mid-1980s, when they were the only, Barney and the rest of us were the only permit holders in the pass up to that point. And then it started to change, and different consulting firms came in. And not all of the people who had done work had a great familiarity with the Crowsnest Pass. And what struck me was that there was little attention paid to the tradition that had been built up. So you had like 20 years of solid work, models built, terminology offered. John Driver, at Barney's encouragement, devised a subphase classification because Barney had done that in Waterton. Ideas about settlement patterning. It just seemed to not be important anymore, which I found a shame. But I'm not saying the archaeology was bad. It was very good archaeology, good assessment, different, more modern techniques of data analysis that hadn't occurred in the 70s. But it's just that there was no recognition of that tradition that had been built up over all the years of work. And that's that. So I include this site, because it is now an archaeological site. this is camp, and this is where all the crews stayed from 1972 on. And just a collection of cabins, uninsulated cabins, trailers. And on the left-hand side, you have it's just in the trees there, but it's the dance hall. It was the last remaining dance hall site in the Canadian Rockies. It was allowed to go to rack and ruin. It was being held up by 2x4s. And finally, everything that you see here is gone today. So it is now an archaeological site of archaeologists, if you will. If you go we're going to pan to the left of the dance hall. From my vantage point in a canoe on a beautiful fall day, you see on the right-hand side an open meadow, an open space, and that is the site of DjPp 3, which is the dance hall site. And I think it's probably one of the most important sites in the Crowsnest Pass. It's on an alluvial fan, and many of the deeply stratified sites in the pass are on alluvial fans. And they can be dynamic creatures, they can move, they can erode, and like many of the sites in the Crow's Nest, there is some mixing of stratigraphy, some loss of the lower, particularly layers, the early stuff, but that's true of most of the sites in the pass, unfortunately. If you go across the water, that's the outlet of Crowsnest Lake, and that's the start of Crowsnest River. And just to the left is DjPp 8. Both 3 and 8 have more than 7,000 years of history. Both have excellent seasonal indicators, which is pretty rare in the Crow's Nest. There are only a handful of sites that give us good seasonality. Indications of fishing, net weights, very nice sites. But DjPp 8 was between bedrock ridges, and you would think that would be a great sediment trap. Unfortunately, it has some mixing too. But these were excavated right at the beginning of the program. These are pictures that Barney took, and I have to acknowledge Lifeways of Canada, and especially Brian Vivian, for taking the thousands upon thousands of slides of Barney's. He was very worried about what was going to happen to his photographic collection, and they're scanning them and making them available. So thank you to Lifeways. So we were talking about, Brian was talking about the lack of shirts. I mean, I just look at that and go, oh, get the sunblock. So this is DjPp 3, and you can see the fan deposits in it, but, and then Daniel Miette, who's going to be talking later this afternoon, provided me with these. He was an undergrad student of Barney's and came down with Jim and Marie on the right there and did spend some time at DjPp 3, so thanks, Dan. This is DjPp 8, the site that's within the bedrock ridges, and this is one that John Driver, his first graduate student, undertook. Towards the east end, there was DjPo 46. This was done, like many other sites, as part of salvage archaeology for highway. That's another funding source, so he patched together many different funding sources. And it has the Pelican Lake buried TP ring, and it's the furthest into the pass that such a ring has been found. And there were other sites out that end, and I can't get into this, unfortunately, but these were winter or fall occupations, and it gave that sense that there was spring to fall occupations in the west end of the pass and fall to spring in the east end. So it gave you this sense that there was a closed system of a seasonal round where they move back and forth. I think it's far more complex than that, and we might be looking at a palimpsest of different seasonal rounds. I put this in because this is DjPo 47, and that's a young Alison Landals, not the girl with the red hair next to her. And then this is the site that Alison did her MA on. So one of the other most significant sites in the Crow's Nest that they found, a series of sites, were the quarries in the Livingston Range. And this is where Etherington Chert is quarried. And in 1972, as the results were coming in from the excavations at DjPp 3 and also from the surveys, they were finding multicolored cherts. They had no idea where they came from. And Barney thought perhaps they were cobbles from the valley, but they got their answer the next year when they started moving up and doing survey up Gold Creek. and finding workshops and ultimately some quarry sites, and that was the source for Etherington Church. And the snow really helps to emphasize some of the pits, and then the limestone tailings cast out. Those have never been excavated. The pits have not yet been excavated, but these are extensive. So in 73, Barney and crew found 6, and then B. Loveseth and Diane Malmberg did a survey up and down, clambering up and down the Livingstons to find more of them, and they found another 7 plus some more workshops. So that's B. And V is excavating a small workshop here, and I think she's doing it because when I first saw this site, it was carpeted with retouch flakes and small flake, just absolutely carpeted, and it got vacuumed up by collectors. So I think she might have been doing it as a bit of salvage. We don't know, and there's some of the quarry sources that they found along the Livingstons. We thought initially that Etherington had a pretty restricted range just to the Crowsnest Pass, and we now know that it goes further. And that's because people have become more familiar with it. I think it resides in a lot of early reports as some kind of colored chert without anybody knowing what it was. But it certainly goes as far as Fort Macleod. It's in the Junction site. It's in Banff. It's now recognized in Waterton. And I think most importantly, it goes west. And why I say that is because there are very important influences and connections with BC, with the Rocky Mountain Trench. Before I get to that, I'll just mention that in 1983, TransAlta Utilities needed a turning point for its massive 500 kilovolt power line that was coming south, needed to turn west. I think an engineer said, oh, there's a good spot, and just put their finger on what happened to be DjPp 137, one of the major Etherington Church quarries. TransAlta was very good. They tried to restrict the location of the tower to a rocky outcrop where there was no evidence of cultural activity, and that worked. But they needed a work platform to bring the big trucks up with all the cable in the tower. So we, meaning Lifeways, excavated across the workshop area here and found kind of not a great quality, this particular stuff, gray-blue chert, but Etherington has a tremendous range, and it can be very good quality, and it can be very poor. Okay, and then just a close-up of some of the pits, but again, we haven't excavated the pits. So, it's not the only lithic material that's used in the pass. Usually with site reports, you can look and you'll have 30, 40 different categories, often just by color. But it's an important one, and especially Pelican Lake, Avonlea, people were using the most locally available source of a material. But when you take that out of the equation, Pelican Lake would typically be second or third in use, in frequency. But there was another one that joined it, and that was Top of the World Chert. And they seem to go hand in hand, especially at some of the sites in the western end of the pass. If you have lots of Etherington Chert, you have lots of Top of the World. And I think, again, that's part of a seasonal round that's taking them into BC, or even perhaps wintering in BC and coming into the pass for summer. This is a magnificent place, Top of the World. It's in the Van Nostrand range. You can see how bedded the chert is. I presume you would just probably mine out the limestone and just heft it up and take the chert away. I went up here in 1987 with Wayne Choquette, Mr. Kootenay Archaeology, and he had some Kootenay friends come, and then John Dormeyer came as well. I did not take this picture. This is from the top of Mount Morrow. I'm in there a tent sleeping because it had been an 8-hour heft to get up into there the day before because somebody got us a little off track. So John Dormeyer and somebody else went up and climbed up and took a picture, but that would all be workshop, like you're sleeping on top of thousands of years of debitage, and the cliffs are right to the right-hand side there. It's been used from earliest pre-contact on. It does have a wide distribution, but it's certainly very much valued by people using the Crowsnest Pass. Another one that's much valued is, although to a lesser degree, is Kootenay argillite from Balfour Bay on Kootenay Lake. It's very distinctive, and I can't point, but the projectile points are examples of the Kootenai argillite with its plate. It looks like you could stick your thumbnail underneath and pry it off. It's got kind of a step fracture quality to it, but it shows up not in huge quantities in the crow's nest. Where it has shown up is really interesting. It shows up as projectile points in DjPm 116 in the Old Man River Dam that Allison and crew dug, and it's very much evident in the projectile point assemblage. And people were coming through probably from this area through to Hunt, which brings us to who is using the pass and who is using these lithic materials and how are they getting around. And it's no surprise, it's been well known for quite a long time that the Kootenai or the Ktunaxa have very much long-standing use and territory of the Crowsnest Pass. So it's been evidenced in the ethnologies that were done by Schaefer and Turney High in the 1930s and up in the early 1940s. And I've taken some of the names of some of the closest Kootenai bands from the report that takes the title that Sandy Peacock will be, is the title of her talk this afternoon. All of the groups have traditions of moving through the pass to hunt on the eastern slopes. And this first one, though, Raven's Nest, its tradition is that it lived in the Crowsnest Pass. There's also stories of Kootenai actually living out permanently in the plains. So there's clearly a long tradition of Kootenai use explaining some of the movement and the exchange of these Rocky Mountain Trench lithic materials. This is their submission for the Grassy Mountain coal mine, laying out their claim of land use in the Crowsnest Pass. Are they the only people to use the pass? No, obviously not. The Blackfoot will present the same kind of land use map, but it's not clear how those territories interacted because, excuse me, the story is that by the late pre-contact, the Blackfoot pushed the Kootenai back because probably the fur trade exacerbated all this too, but they pushed them out of the pass. This is the paper that I was referring to this morning. That's my time. That Barney wrote as a conference transcript from his talk in Denver in 1978, but it's never been published, but this is widely circulated. You can see how many times the staple's been taken out and Xeroxed and handed on. So it's called Men, Mountains, and Mammals, and I would forward a little joke that maybe the women were out on the plains. I'm not sure whether... I can't laugh. I found my own report that I was using non-inclusive language back in the 70s too, so I shouldn't tease him. But in this, he lays out, as I said this morning, sweeping ideas about the relationship of the different cultural units over time. And this is the first time I can source that he mentions tobacco plains phase. This is where he has introduced the idea of a tobacco plains phase, which represents Kootenai. And at the same time, I'm sorry, it's the second column from the left. The left-hand column is Old Women's and Blackfoot, and so you've got them kind of contemporary. And he pushes the roots of tobacco plains back through Avonlea and back through Pelican Lake. And I think from the evidence from the Rocky Mountain Trench that Wayne Choquette has collected over the years, many, many years of work, plus the evidence of not only the lithic materials and lithic use, but also very diversified subsistence patterns in the Crowsnest Pass that are very much replicated in the Rocky Mountain Trench. There's clearly very strong evidence of these wide geographic traditions of movement between the Rocky Mountain Trench and Crowsnest Pass. And I don't have any problem pushing that kind of ancestral route back to Pelican Lake because we see kind of a consistency. And Wayne Choquette, I think, would in the Rocky Mountain Trench would even go back further. And those are Wayne Choquette's terms for the presence of these ancestral Kootenai. So, I mean, that's just one of the many directions that archaeological research in the Crow's Nest can go and needs to be explored further. We need to explore Barney's definitions of tobacco plains in the Crow's Nest, microstylistic differences, the use of topper of the world chert for these very small projectile points in the late period. And how's my time? Okay, I'll just end here. This picture was taken on Beehive Mountain in 1984, and Norris, the man who, he wasn't the first, but he did the comprehensive definition and description of Etherington Chert. He came out, and so we joined him and went up Beehive Mountain. Unfortunately, that's not Norris on the left, but that was an interesting day trying to find more sources of Etherington Chert. And I'll quickly add, I think one of the things that needs to be done, future research, is to go back and explore all those different quarries and get good samples and get a good geochemical signature fingerprint of the chert so we know what we're dealing with. Thank you very much.